as we do our introductions. So do welcome to our webinar, Get Low Emission Zone Ready with Vehicle Retrofit Solutions. So today we're focusing on solutions for light commercial vehicles, referred to as LCVs. So we're mainly talking about vans, pickups, minibuses, those sorts of vehicles. So thanks for taking the time to attend this webinar today. We've set this up to just help raise awareness of not just the low emission zones, but for businesses to prepare themselves, and businesses particularly who do operate LCVs and vans, so that you're ready for their introduction next year. My name's Heather Quinn. I'm Programme Manager at the Energy Saving Trust, working on both the low emission zone support funds and the retrofit funds. So we'll go through a bit of housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded and we'll be sharing it on the Energy Saving Trust website shortly after today. All attendees, your microphones and cameras are turned off, so unfortunately we cannot see or hear you, but you can still communicate with us. You can use the chat function, which is to the right of your screen. And please do post any questions that you have in the chat sort of throughout the session. We will try to answer these at the end of the presentations. And over the course of the next hour, you will hear from myself on behalf of Energy Saving Trust on the support that's available to van drivers and businesses in Scotland. But it's not just me speaking. I am also joined by some great speakers today. So we'll hear from Shauna Clark from City of Edinburgh Council, also from Tom Sterling from Dundee City Council, and they'll both be providing an overview of their local low emission zones and the proposed plans. Then we have a recording from Will Heckler from Aberdeen City Council to hear about their plans as well. And finally, last but not least, Amir Rao from the Clean Vehicle Retrofit Accreditation Scheme, also known as CIVRAS, has joined us to discuss the retrofit solutions that are currently available for LCVs. And then we'll finish up with our Q&A session. So as I've said, please do send us through your questions. So firstly, let's cover what support's available from Energy Saving Trust. And to just give you some background into who we are and what we do, we are an independent organisation. So we work to address the climate emergency, and we work with everyone to achieve this mission. We empower millions of householders every year to make better energy choices. We deliver transformative programmes working with governments, and we support businesses with strategies, research, assurance and communications, enabling them to play their part in building a sustainable future. And we're funded by Transport Scotland, an agency of the Scottish Government, to deliver a number of programmes to achieve this, to increase the uptake of electric vehicles, to reduce the reliance on passenger cars by encouraging a shift towards shared and active travel options, and of course, preparing businesses and households for the introduction of Scotland's 4 planned low emission zones. So the reason we're all here today is that, yes, low emission zones are coming. So they're set to be introduced in Aberdeen, Glasgow, Aberdeen and Dundee next year in 2022. And the low emission zones are similar to the clean air zones that you might have heard of throughout the rest of the UK, including Bath and Birmingham and the ultra low emission zone in London. They are similar in that they share a key objective, and that is to protect public health by improving local air quality. And zones are effective. So according to Client Earth, within its first year, London's ultra low emission zone saw a 37% reduction in pollution levels than they would have had without a zone in place. And air pollution is a major public health concern. In 2019, the World Health Organization published that air pollution and climate change were the greatest threats to human health. And the Clean Air for Scotland strategy highlights that the air pollution is estimated to cost the NHS around £15 billion a year because of the associated health impacts. And in Scotland, fine particulate matter was associated with around 2,000 premature deaths. And because air pollution can increase your risk of heart and respiratory diseases, asthma, your chances of a stroke, and even certain cancers. And drivers are also at risk. So drivers sitting in their vehicle are exposed to these pollutants, especially sitting in slow-moving traffic with the window down, and the type of driving that's really commonly associated with driving in city centres and urban environments. So there's a risk of drivers having higher exposure to air pollution in our cities. As such, low emission zones are focused on restricting access to those areas of the most polluting vehicles on our roads. And these are areas already of high pollution levels. So it's a step taken to try and tackle air pollution and improve our air quality. And the restrictions are set based on the Euro standard of the vehicle, with older, more polluting vehicles facing a penalty when they enter a zone. So for diesel vehicles, the proposed standards allow Euro 6 or equivalent vehicle to enter penalty-free, and Euro 4 for petrol. On the penalties, currently the low emission zones will differ to the clean air zones in the rest of the UK, which issue sort of a daily charge for uncompliant vehicles that enter. But in Scotland, non-compliant vehicles will be issued a penalty every time they enter the zone, and the penalty could increase for repeated visits. So this could potentially increase the costs to you and your business if you don't take any action. For more information on the standards and the penalties, you can and the proposed regulations, you can find that on the Low Emission Zone Scotland website. So we'll send you the link to that following this webinar. In terms of what support you can access, in Scotland, through funding provided by Transport Scotland, energy saving trusts are able to offer micro businesses and sole traders funding to help them prepare for the low emission zones. Our low emission zone retrofit fund offers grant funding for 80% of the cost of a retrofit solution. That's up to £5,000 per vehicle, and you can apply for up to 3 vehicles per business. This enables you to extend the life of your vehicle without increasing the exhaust emissions. And it's a good option for businesses running vehicles that have been potentially adapted or retrofitted for a specialist purpose to meet the needs of your business, or replacing a vehicle where replacing the vehicle would be a higher cost to you compared to sort of standard LCVs. We do only fund solutions that will reduce the vehicle's exhaust emissions to an acceptable standard for entry into the low emission zones under the current proposed standards. And Amir will give some more information on that later on. But if retrofit's not an option, but you're still looking to make some changes, then our Low Emission Zone Support Fund offers a £2,500 grant for the safe disposal of non-compliant vehicles. Again, a maximum of 3 vehicles per business can be applied for. And as long as you take the vehicle to an authorised treatment facility once you've received a grant offer from us, you will receive that grant funding. And by removing older, more polluting vehicles from the roads, from the used vehicle market, you can focus on moving towards cleaner alternatives for your business. But if you're not a micro business or sole trader, or you're looking to explore, or you are and you're looking to explore other options, there is other support available. Our low carbon transport loan offers interest-free loans for up to £120,000 for a new electric or range extending LCV and van options. That is capped at up to £35,000 per vehicle, but there's an increasing number of models becoming available, and that's only expected to significantly grow in the coming years. To complement that, grant funding for the installation of charge points to support an electric vehicle is also available. So that can either be at your business premises, helping you charge overnight or whilst parked, or you could even have it installed at your home to charge at the end of your working day if you typically take your work vehicle home with you. If you're unsure about what option to choose, we also offer free sustainable transport advice and fleet reviews. So we can look across all business vehicles at the sustainable options that are suitable for your specific business and your business's needs. And we'll make recommendations to help your business reduce its exhaust emissions and also save you money. I've only specified funding available for light commercial vehicles on these slides, but if your business operates any other vehicle types, please do get in touch with us or visit our website, and we can help you access that information. So just to finish off, by taking action and exploring ways in which you or your business can reduce your exhaust emissions, you should see the following benefits. So a reduction in the running cost of your vehicle. Making your vehicles more efficient typically reduces the amount of fuel you use and therefore your running costs. Not to mention, you're able to avoid facing the future penalties within the zones if you were to say do nothing. You'll also be reducing your exhaust emissions, including greenhouse gases that cause climate change, therefore reducing the environmental impact of your business. But in conjunction, you'll also be contributing to the improvement of air quality within the zones you operate, making them nicer places to live and work. And also by doing so, you'll not only help reduce the increasing health concerns amongst the general public, but by contributing to the quality, the improvement in air quality, you're also improving the quality of life for your customers, your staff, and even yourself as well. So that's all from me, but I will hand over to Shauna Clark from Edinburgh, from City of Edinburgh Council, and she's going to give us an overview about Edinburgh's low emission zone plans. Over to you, Shauna.
Right, thank you, Heather. I'm just having a slight problem with my PowerPoint presentation. I think it has crashed. I wonder if Kate can put the presentation up. Would that be okay?
Yeah, of course, we'll try and get that up for you. Just bear with us.
Thank you. Lovely, thank you. Okay, yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Shauna Clark. I work for Edinburgh City Council. I'm an environmental health officer, but very involved with the low emission zone work, just really through the public health benefits of it. However, it is a major transport intervention for the council. So working alongside a lot of transport planning colleagues and a lot of others, to try and get this implemented. Okay, so I'm going to just take you through some slides. With these, Kate, you can just fire through that whole, there's 4 or 5 bullet points here. And just a wee bit of background, that's it, lovely, as to, where we are. And of course, Heather touched on some of that in any case. And the first point is sort of my real background, which is, the fact that, we monitor and we have been monitoring air pollution in urban areas and cities and, well, towns and cities for a long while now, and realizing that there are exceedances of, statutory objectives. So, and these objectives, should have been really achieved by 2010 originally, and that was extended to 2015, as a legal requirement. So, but as most sort of urban areas across Europe and UK, we've not been able to achieve those objectives. So really, we're in a position now that, we're needing to take action and try and get the levels down really in the fastest time possible. So yeah, LEZs are becoming an established tool to deal with, air quality problems. And again, as Heather touched on, that there are clean air zones down south becoming more common. And obviously in Europe, low emission zones have been established for some time, especially with the commercial vehicle sector. Obviously, we've had some commitment from the Scottish Government through the Programme for Government to work with the 4 main cities in Scotland to get low emission zones established. There was an original timeline for that, was to get them in place for 2020, and obviously we've had other things happening and whatnot. So that's not come about, but we are on another course to try and get them implemented for next year. So I'll come on to that a little bit more. But that's with Scottish Government's programme for government. But more locally in Edinburgh, we've just revised our local transport strategy. So really looking at the future plans for the city in terms of infrastructure and mobility and moving around, and how we can do that sustainably, and how we can do that with all the health benefits that are needed as well. So in that, the council is committed to establishing the low emission zone going forward. Okay, and so a wee bit about why we're here, I suppose. I thought I'd just give you a wee snapshot of also some of the the work behind all the problem, if you like, the emissions problem. We've been working with SEPA, the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency, for a number of years now, really, looking deeply, sort of analysing the problems. And this is really a snapshot of some of that work, whereby we're able to look at the concentrations of pollution in all the different streets, and associate the actual vehicle sector that looks to make the pollution problem, or that contributes to the pollution problem. And this is just sort of give you an idea of sort of what we're dealing with in the city centre, in particular for Edinburgh. Is it sort of shows you how different vehicles or different sectors have different influences on different streets. And you can imagine, I suppose, a street that doesn't have a bus route going down it is really not affected by buses, more so by smaller vehicles or vans and cars. And this just gives us a good understanding that we do need to be making sure that our plans going forward are dealing with all the different vehicle types in the city centre. I should say that we've got air quality monitoring or air quality issues across the city and some of the suburban, more sort of arterial streets or roads, and but they do tend to be quite localized to the arterial road, whereas in the city centre we've got quite more of an extensive problem. And in the outer areas, we have in the past associated certain vehicle types, predominantly buses, in fact, with the problem on those arterial routes. So but that's just to give an example of the fact that in the city centre we did realise we needed to be addressing all vehicle types. And the next slide sort of takes us through a little bit more, or gives a snapshot and a picture of what we've been doing to try and focus in on the low emission zone measure, and how we should really be assessing it. I mean, a lot of that was defined by Scottish Government and Transport Scotland through the National Low Emission Framework. There was certain principles and methodology in that we were asked to explore in order to come up with our low emission zone. Not surprisingly, the main one is to improve air quality. Obviously, that's the main objective. Also, we were pretty much on a course with SEPA and Transport Scotland with this modelling work, etc., to provide the evidence base for our decision making through the low emission zone. So that was that involved a lot of extensive traffic monitoring, which the council has used to update their traffic model, and that's also been used to update the air quality model. So it's quite an extensive work that's been going on for quite a number of years now. It was 2016 when we first done extensive traffic monitoring across the city, and there was, I don't know, maybe 180 locations where we monitored traffic and tried to get a good handle on really what was going on in terms of the numbers, but also in terms of the different types of fleets and and what age those fleets are, or what sort of Euro standard those fleets are. So yeah, we have got, you know, an immense amount of information on all of that. So yeah, that was the real evidence base behind, you know, appraising the LEZ. There are other things we had to take into account, you know, how feasible it is to get to you know, implement and deliver the zone, and really as well it had to fit in with all the other strategy priorities, you know, that the council has. So we looked at three main options in the end. Option one was you know, focused on the city centre, and basically in order to draw the boundary, you know, we had to look at how we would manage it through the traffic network, if you like. So there had to be a clear diversion almost, you know, to allow people whose vehicles were not compliant, you know, so that they would not have to enter the zone, that they could be diverted away from the zone. So yeah, there had to be a clear and obvious diversion, if you like, as well. So, but what we soon realised with option one is, particularly in the western end of the boundary, that some of the streets there, although they're quite city centre streets, they're relatively low trafficked and therefore low pollution. So we soon realised that by putting some of the boundary traffic into those areas, we would see quite a significant impact. We would see quite a jump in traffic, increase in traffic, and a jump in the pollution. So we explored around looking at another boundary, which is what we have there in option two. And for those of you who know Edinburgh, that takes more of a north-south straight line, if you like, on the west end down Lothian Road. So we ended up exploring that as well as an option, but in the end, well, I don't know if I should give the spoiler right now, but anyway, basically with choosing this option, what we found was obviously a lot of the traffic, you know, would probably uses that route anyway, if you like, north-south, and therefore we weren't really encouraging the behaviour change, and we weren't really going to see any improvements in Lothian Road. And because it is a quite heavily polluted street as it is, it was, you know, obviously on our radar in order to improve it somewhat. So there were some issues then, you know, when we look further at option two. Option three was this combination of one of the city centre areas or zones with alongside an extended urban area boundary, which roughly took the line of the city bypass. And with that, we were proposing just for it to affect the commercial vehicle sector. We weren't going to include cars in that. And at the time, there, you know, this was a number of years ago, 2019, when we were out for public consultation then. Yeah, there was a lot of concern, obviously, about, you know, how Euro 6s were performing and whatnot, and with the large change that would be required within the car sector, it was decided, well, amongst other factors, you know, it was decided they wouldn't be included in that boundary. So it was intended that it was only going to include commercial vehicles. Well, really since 2019, and then with our recent appraisal of, you know, these options, and with having to put, well, what we've done recently this summer is really to go back out to statutory and public consultation on our preferred option. What we did was that we actually scoped out the idea of proceeding with an extended urban area boundary. And there was quite a number of reasons for that, ranging from things like, you know, even since 2019, we're always, you know, and as most years, we are seeing improvements in air quality. It's just that obviously these have not occurred fast enough. And of course, we all know that there's many reasons for that, not you know, there's been national policy to encourage diesel, which obviously we know now is, you know, probably more polluting than we expected, etc. So yeah, there's lots of reasons why we see improvements in air quality anyway. And in fact, what we were finding with some of our suburban and outer air quality management areas is that we were in a position to look to revoke some of them. So there's a couple, well, there's Inverleith Row in the north of the city that we're currently looking to revoke. And also in Great Junction Street and around there, we're hoping to do the same, in near future. So we're looking at, air quality improvements elsewhere in the city, if you like. We also looked at, a lot of the detail of the more recent fleet data. We were finding that there was quite a high compliance with certain sectors. HGVs, for example, one of the types of HGVs, sorry, I always forget which one, was up, almost 90% compliant, but we're finding in general, HGVs could be anything from 75 to 90% compliant. And by that, I mean, obviously the Euro 6 standard. The bus sector, well, as you know, Lothian Buses operates, the most frequent services and whatnot in Edinburgh, and they're currently almost 90% compliant as well, and saying that they will be 100% compliant very soon. With but overall, other buses and coaches, quite high compliance. Well, about 60-odd% compliant with the proposed standards that time. But what we were finding as well with the light good vehicles that, well, in fact, they weren't up on those sort of figures at all. They were just over 40%, actually I think 45 or 48% compliant. So we realize, I think, with that could be a sector that could be quite adversely impacted on the proposal if it went ahead with the citywide boundary. So, that was some of our thinking again, just because we had to do obviously impact assessment work and look at the economics of the impact as well. And not least to say, there's also COVID that has happened in the past year, etc. So, with that dilemma, we've looked at some of the grace periods or how long we're going to allow people, time to try and adapt and get ready for the low emission zone. So in that respect, although we had hoped to proceed certainly with the city centre low emission zone within a year of making an announcement, I think we're quite happy now to look to 2 years so that we can allow further, to help people adapt and get ready for the low emission zone. Okay, so yeah, I think the next slide is one that, oh God, right, you can flick through, all of these, Kate, for us, thanks. And there's actually a nicer map that will come up as well at the end. So please just flick through them. This is our scheme. That's it. Thank you. This is what we are. This is what we've proposed, for Edinburgh. It's a city centre only boundary. As I mentioned earlier, we've obviously we've included the West End, although we realise there are significant impacts and actually some quite residential streets in the West End. But we need to obviously develop that further with, what network changes and what improvements we can make to certain junctions and whatnot in that area to try and improve things, in the future when it comes into play. It's a city centre only boundary. We're intending that includes all vehicle types except motorcycles and mopeds. We just didn't have the data that supported the fact that, those smaller vehicles, to be fair, that they are a significant problem for us. So they're not included in the low emission zone. It's to be introduced in May 2022. As I said, we're going to what we propose is a 2-year grace period, so that means enforcement of the scheme wouldn't start till the 1st of June 2024. It'll operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And we're not allowing for any local exemptions. However, what seems to be coming through with some of the consultation stuff is like maybe in very exceptional circumstances there could be a situation for us to allow a local exemption. But yeah, that's the proposal. I mean, I suppose the thing is to say, as Heather said, you know, a lot of our scheme is set obviously by the national standards as well. So the Euro 6 and Euro 4 for diesel and petrol. We've obviously got the national penalty charges and the national exemptions. So, you know, I think we're quite happy that the national exemptions, you know, cover what vehicles need to be exempt, really. Okay, next slide. And that's just really a snapshot of our objectives. I think I mentioned it briefly. There are 2 that are statutory, whereby we need to reduce the emissions of NO2, the main traffic-related polluted, and the other one is to work towards reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. Our other local objectives are to do with, you know, trying to minimise the traffic displacement, to make sure that, you know, we are supporting the whole sustainable travel world. And I think that's fair to say that, you know, some of the support grants also allow that. So more so for individuals trying to, you know, maybe get them to replace or dispose of the vehicle and consider, you know, alternative transport by more sustainable means. And then obviously, yeah, just that we need to be aligned with all the national funding to help adaptation. That's our main objectives for the low emission zone. And then just a note to say, yeah, so these proposals we've been out to consultation on over the summer. That has unfortunately now closed. And we've got, you know, we did get quite a bit of feedback from members of the public. We've got about 5,000 people who responded to the questionnaire, but obviously we've got a lot of engagement with stakeholders and statutory consultees. So we've got a job on our hands at the moment to pull all that together and present that to a council committee to see how we're going to go forward. And I think the last slide, the next one, just sort of shows what our next steps are. Yeah, to consider the consultation responses, to finalise the scheme. We will have a committee that meets at the end of October to and hopefully if everything is agreed, that would allow us to go to the statutory notice period. There might, you know, if there's formal objections or things like that at that period, they would also have to be considered. We'd have to speak, you know, go back to committee in January, and also Scottish ministers would have to consider the proposals as well before, you know, if council agrees to send it on to Scottish ministers. So all that, and the idea is to get it all in place by next May. So this is a whistle-stop tour of, yeah, the Edinburgh Low Emission Zone scheme development.
That's great. Thanks, Shauna. So just finally, Shauna mentioned that, yeah, there's some initiatives for individuals as well, or this will also affect individuals. There is funding support from Transport Scotland through the Energy Saving Trust available to individuals. If you're interested in that, just get in touch with us. Our contact details will be in the follow-up email. But I will hand over to Tom Sterling from Dundee City Council just now, and he'll unveil Dundee's plans. Over to you, Tom.
Thanks, Heather. Hopefully I can share. Is there? Okay, hopefully you can see that. So I suppose the background to our low emission zone is similar to Edinburgh, and Heather's outlined some of the reasons why as well. we're looking at a low emission zone in Dundee. Essentially, Scottish Government commitment to introduce low emission zones in the 4 main cities was a commitment they made, I think, first of all in 2017. So this is just this working its way through. I'm the chair of the Dundee Low Emission Zone Delivery Group for Dundee. I'm an environmental health officer by training. I've been involved in looking at air quality in Dundee, but previously in Renfrewshire and previously in Edinburgh. When we first probably started talking about low emission zones, Sean, in about 2008 or 9, when everybody was a bit scared of them then, but we did start thinking about it then. So I'll not dwell too much on the kind of the background to it, because we know that it's been covered. But essentially, just quickly, the Transport Scotland have a document called the National Low Emission Framework, and using that process, we initially identified 5 possible options for Dundee. Basically all centred on our inner ring road, because it's a natural boundary for the city centre. We initially did some public and also stakeholder consultation in September 2019 on those 5 options. We also asked at that point about, whether people supported a low emission zone, the idea of it, and the idea of it for Dundee. So at that time, it was about 65% of responses were in favour of having a low emission zone. And then through that process and through some detailed traffic modelling that's part of the process, we identify the preferred sort of final option for Dundee's low emission zone. And I'll summarise the steps we took to get there and the conclusions that we reached to help identify that option. So basically, following that initial option appraisal, the preferred option covers an area inside our inner ring road. If you know Dundee, I'll show you a map in a minute. So it covers the area inside the inner ring road. It's not a huge area, but again, our proposal as well is to include all vehicles. And there are 3 car parks on just inside that inner ring road that are all entered directly off the inner ring road, so they're not included. And also, as part of that public consultation in 2019, we were, what emerged from that is that we should consider, as part of our low emission zone options, to look at Lochee Road, which is the sort of northeast arterial route into Dundee city centre, and it has some of our highest levels for NOx and NO2. So it was right to look at that option. So when we did that, we looked at a couple of options. So you probably not know the roads names, but basically the first option goes sort of part of way up that radial route, and the other option goes further up that route. But when we did that, the traffic modelling showed that extending the low emission zone onto Lochee Road significantly increased congestion in the city, as any non-compliant vehicles had to look for alternatives. And also, if in doing that, they're driving more miles, so it's not good in terms of our climate change objectives. If you're driving more miles, you're producing more CO2 as well as local pollutants. That also increased journey times and queue lengths at key junctions across the city. So, having done that work, and it was valuable work to do, and then just some more of the impacts there. Increased journey times on certain key roads. Forfar Road is another key route, radial route for more to the northeast, and Dock Street is the main road through the city centre by the river. And you can see there some figures from the modelling for number of vehicles increase on Dock Street itself, and also City Road, which goes off Lochee Road, but is more residential in nature. So it wouldn't it didn't make sense to put non-compliant vehicles down a more sort of residential road. And we also found that, including Lochee Road, although it's nowhere near the Tay Road Bridge, because of that, pushing vehicles to find other routes, it extended queues onto the Tay Road Bridge. So that led us to conclude that we should not include Lochee Road options in our low emission zone, but we do, the City Council, so our kind of transport team, are going to look at additional measures they can look at on that Lochee Road corridor. What I would say in terms of, and there's the final option there on that slide there. So basically, the city centre, a much smaller area than in Edinburgh, for example, but the road going around the outside there is the inner ring road, which again just makes that natural boundary. And then just on this road going off here is the Lochee Road corridor, and it runs all the way up to the Kingsway, which is the kind of trunk road that goes around the north of Dundee. So so that's our final shape of our low emission zone. I'll not dwell too much on the traffic modelling, but basically the conclusion from the traffic modelling is that this option, because the inner ring road itself is not included and still allows for movement of traffic across the city, the network operates relatively similarly to existing conditions. So, for example, commercial vehicles such as light goods vehicles, for example, should still be able to travel and go around about their business without too much impact in terms of traffic congestion or having to take different routes. Key though, there is a reduction in traffic levels inside that inner ring road, which is what we want, because we did have a lot of various points where we weren't complying within that inner ring road. In terms of the operation, as we've said before, and others have said, the compliant vehicles will be Euro 6 and Euro 4 for petrol. And again, also, as Sean has said, for Edinburgh, we're not including motorcycles in ours. They're not significant enough in number to make any significant contribution. We're consistent with the 4 other cities in terms of it's all vehicle, and it will be enforced through a network of ANPR, so automatic number plate recognition cameras around that ring road, which we're working on at the moment. Similarly to Edinburgh and the other cities, our intention is we're working through that process through our committees to introduce the low emission zone on at the end of May 2022. Again, subject to approval by Scottish ministers. In terms of enforcement, again, very similar to Edinburgh, and I think Aberdeen, we're looking at a 2-year grace period. So enforcement will commence at the end of May 2024. And in doing the thinking around that, we have to allow a 1-year grace period, but taking into account the impacts of COVID, both on the bus operators and other city businesses, we considered that an additional 1-year grace period would be appropriate, and that'll apply to both residents and non-residents. So again, just the standard exemptions that are included in the legislation. We don't propose to have any local exemptions, but that's something that we may consider on an exceptional basis, similar to Edinburgh. And And then the penalties are there, but you've heard about that. The thing about the penalties, if it's maybe not been discussed, is they do escalate. So that range is for, say, for cars or vans. The first one would be 60. If there's another offence within a certain period, then it would. I think it doubles and then doubles and then doubles up to a maximum of 480. So, yeah, the time limited exemptions, again, I've just talked through that we're not considering time limited exemptions. And then in terms of our own low emission zone, you can see further information at our own website. I've given the address there. And again, we can answer any specific questions you have about Dundee through the email address there. And then just to finish off, just again showing the map of the final scheme. But when we get to the the point for questions, I'll be happy to take any questions you have on Dundee. So that's all I wanted to cover today. So thanks for your time.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, so as Tom said, they're happy to answer questions, so please do post them in the chat. Tom, if you can stop sharing, that's great. We are going to hear a recording from Will Heckler from Aberdeen City Council to hear about the plans in Aberdeen.
Thank you, everyone. My name's Will and I work for Aberdeen City Council's transport team, and I'm currently managing the appraisal and implementation of our low emission zone. So I've just got a few slides for you today, just outlining where we are in that process, what we've done to date, and what the next steps are. So first of all, just a brief overview of air pollution in Aberdeen. Generally, air quality is good here, but even with the opening of the Aberdeen Western Peripheral route in 2019, we have instances of exceedances of the air pollution objective levels, mostly in the city centre. And I'm not sure how familiar people on the call are with Aberdeen, but this area where I've got my cursor on is kind of the main city centre street. So you can see King Street, Union Street, Holborn Junction are our main areas of concern, where the red dots indicate a level of pollution beyond what the current legal limits are. So that's our main shopping street, where there's obviously lots of people living and working and spending time in, which is why the air pollution there is a concern. And we've also got areas of concern down on Virginia Street, Market Street. It's a big shopping centre there. So the city centre is our main area of concern. Hence the reason why we're looking at a low emission zone in the city centre. So like the other cities in Scotland pursuing low emission zones, we've been following the National Low Emission Framework process that was established by the Scottish Government to help us determine the optimum low emission zone for Aberdeen. Last year we developed 8 options that went out for public and stakeholder engagement. It was really 4 options with a variant of each option, I suppose, which included or excluded Denburn Road. And even if you're not familiar with Aberdeen, these titles are not particularly important. I suppose it's just the main point here is that there was a scale of options, I suppose, where option 1 was the smallest option and option 4 was the largest. And I'll show some images of these in a second. So these went out for consultation last year, and at the same time they've been going through the traffic modelling and air quality assessment process, as well as wider appraisal to try and help us determine what the optimum LEZ is for Aberdeen. So again, I know these perhaps aren't showing too clearly in your screens, but this slide just, I suppose, shows the different scales of options we looked at. So our first option, option 1, was a fairly small option, quite a tight core in the city centre, gradually increasing in size up to option 4, which was a much larger area. And I mentioned Denburn Road as the variant of each of these options. That's a street that runs underneath the city centre, but it's quite an important north-south route. So each of the options we looked at included or excluded Denburn Road as the kind of variants of each of the options. Well, yeah, as well as the public consultation, we've been appraising these options against a range of criteria and starting to sift them out depending on their performance, with the main issues being their impact on traffic, their impact on air quality, public acceptability, and also the city centre, making sure the city centre remains a healthy and accessible area, especially just now as a lot of our businesses are struggling with the impact of COVID, and we're all working hard on the recovery of that. So fairly early on in the process, it was clear that options 2 and 3 didn't meet many of the objectives. They weren't particularly acceptable to members of the public, and they didn't perform particularly well in traffic terms, so they were sifted out on that basis. Option 1, the smallest option, and option 4, the largest options, were the options that received most support amongst the public. They also both performed fairly well in traffic modelling terms, but as you can imagine, they had quite different impacts on air quality, with option 1, the smallest option, obviously having a more limited impact compared to the larger option, option 4. However, there were concerns expressed about option 4, mainly in relation to that last point there about the city centre, the accessibility of the city centre. Because option 4 covered such a large area, there was really only one city centre car park that would actually be accessible to non-compliant vehicles. And as I say, there was a concern around that maybe we were being too restrictive in terms of city centre access, especially at the moment when our businesses are looking towards COVID recovery, and we want to encourage people to come to our city centres as much as they can. So in response to this, we developed this a hybrid option, option 5, which I'll pop on the screen now. And that really was an effort to, I suppose, combine the best of the smaller and the larger options. So it's a fairly small area, but it's been extended out to include some additional streets, some traditional through routes of the city, just to try and maximise the air quality benefits of that option without stretching the low emission zone itself into areas where a large number of residents and businesses would be affected, even though they're not particular areas of air quality concern. So this was the option that our councillors agreed to take forward for consultation, and we went out for public and stakeholder consultation over the summer on this option, and I'll get on to the outcomes of that consultation in a second. But just to run through, I suppose, some of the findings of this option in the traffic model. It performs relatively well. Obviously, traffic levels reduced within the low emission zone, and there's some displacement of traffic out with the zone, but nothing too concerning at this stage that we can't mitigate against. But we have committed to continuing to monitor traffic levels and the impacts of the low emission zone as traffic perhaps picks up again once as we emerge from the pandemic, and once the LEZ's operational. Yeah, I suppose inevitably some distances and journey times will increase for non-compliant vehicles, but generally congestion is predicted to decrease, and combined with some city centre traffic reduction measures, we are anticipating some quite drastic reductions in air pollution as a result of the low emission zone. And as that slide says, an 87% reduction is anticipated on Union Street, which, as I say, is our main street through the city centre. So that's quite significant and quite a hopeful result for us. So, taking the outcomes of the recent consultation, we've had a look at the some of the main concerns that were raised and whether the boundary perhaps needs to change as a result of that. Perhaps the simplest and easiest one to address, first of all, was a concern that was raised by the Trinity Shopping Centre in Aberdeen. They quite fairly, I suppose, pointed out that they're the only shopping centre within the low emission zone, and their car park and servicing area are included. And they felt this was, unfair to them and perhaps anti-competitive compared to the other shopping centres not being that situation. So they requested that we consider removal of their access from the low emission zone. And as you can see, this is the sort of the change that we're looking at the moment, and I think that's one that can be accommodated fairly easily just by a slight tweak to the boundary. And because through routing is still prevented through that area, I think this is one that we can, as I say, accommodate without too many impacts on the wider air quality. So that's one that we're looking at the moment. I suppose a slightly trickier change that we've also been we've also felt the need to address following the consultation outcomes is in relation to our eastern boundary. Again, I'm not sure how familiar people are with Aberdeen, but the option we took out for consultation included East North Street and Commerce Street within our low emission zone. And anyone familiar with Aberdeen will know that this route here down King Street, along East North Street, down Commerce Street, it is one of the main access routes through the city centre, and more importantly is a key access route to Aberdeen Harbour from the north. And there was a concern raised during consultation that if that route to the harbour from the north was closed off to non-compliant vehicles, that would encourage a shift in non-compliant vehicles to the east of that, along streets that are residential streets and along the beachfront, which are certainly not places we particularly want a large shift of goods vehicles, either heavy or light goods vehicles. So yeah, that was I suppose a legitimate concern that we took on board following the consultation, and have started to look at different variations of. So one of the options that we're looking at the moment is taking East North Street and Commerce Street out of the LEZ. That should allow access to the harbour from the north, but still prevent through routing of non-compliant vehicles. So that's one that will have maybe certain air quality implications, but by keeping that through route closed to traffic, we think that's probably within the acceptable limits. The other option we're looking at is taking out that entire eastern corridor, so taking East North Street, Commerce Street, Virginia Street and Market Street out of the low emission zone, and that provides a route right around the LEZ for all vehicles, and keeps, again, the harbour fully accessible. That one I think will perhaps struggle in air quality terms, given that Virginia Street and Market Street are areas of high pollution levels. And I think the emerging modelling is starting to show that if we do keep that entire route open, we really are shifting quite a lot of non-compliant traffic onto that route because of the LEZ restrictions and because of some of the wider restrictions we're looking to implement in the city centre. So that one might be trickier to progress on air quality terms. But in any case, our next step is to take the modelling outcomes of the different variations to our councillors and get agreement from them as to which option we proceed with at the next stage of the process. Just a quick word on scope. I think similar to all the Scottish local authorities, we're looking at a low emission zone that encompasses buses, all cars, light goods vehicles and heavy goods vehicles, and obviously following the Scottish Government emission standards that were discussed earlier, so Euro 6 for diesel vehicles and Euro 4 for petrol vehicles. And I think that's consistent with what the other cities in Scotland are doing. Our low emission zone on the 30th of May 2022, and we're proposing a 2-year grace period during which enforcement won't take place. So that'll apply to both residents and non-residents, so a uniform grace period for all vehicles. And that means that enforcement would commence on the 30th of May 2024. I'll finish up just again on next steps. So as I mentioned, if our councillors are amenable to our boundary revisions and they're happy with that boundary going forward to the next stage of the process, we hope to launch that next stage on the 1st of November when we formally publish the scheme. And that triggers a 28-day objection period where any formal objections to the scheme can be submitted. We'll obviously, depending on the volume and content of those objections, we hope, assuming there are no insurmountable objections, to submit our final scheme to Scottish ministers late this year or early next year. And as I mentioned, that will allow us to formally declare the scheme in May 2022 and allow the LEZ to become fully operational and enforceable from 2024. So that's just a quick rundown of where we are in the process, what we've done so far and what our next steps are, which I hope is useful for you. Yes, happy to take any questions at the end.
That's great, and thanks to Will for providing us with that video. So finally, our final speaker is Amir Rauf from the Clean Vehicle Retrofit Accreditation Scheme team here at Energy Saving Trust. He's going to discuss retrofit solutions available for LCVs. So over to you, Amir.
Cheers, Heather. Hi, guys. So yeah, just as Heather says, I'll take you through a few slides to explain Severas and retrofit options for LCVs as we are at the moment. So, okay, so at the moment, obviously, if you're a LCV owner, operator, if you have, a few of these in your business at the moment, your options are, chances are it will be one of these. You either completely avoid, the low emission zone, you accept and pay the charge, or in this case, in Scotland's cases, it will be fines. You rearrange your fleet. So if you do have Euro 4 petrol vehicles, or you have, Euro 6 diesel vehicles, some people are obviously choosing to use those vehicles instead of their older Euro 4 or Euro 5 diesels, or in less cases, older petrols. So that's obviously an option for some. And then there's obviously the option of buying new compliant vehicles. That's easier said than done, obviously, because it's a case of selling your older vehicle, probably losing money on it, because I think the closer we're getting to introduction of low emission zones, I think we're seeing a kind of a reduction or a drop in value of Euro 5 diesels, Euro 4 and Euro 5 diesels. And then obviously it would have to be a case of buying a newer vehicle. And then the final option, which in fact wasn't really an option up until maybe the last, I'd say maybe last 6 months to a year, would be retrofit your LCV. And we've finally got a few options on the Severas list in regards to that. So what would be right for retrofit? So these are probably some of the factors that an owner of an LCV would have to go through. What is the replacement cost of my Euro 4 or Euro 5 diesel vehicle? How much time have I got left in terms of service life? If you've just bought it, if you've only recently added it to your fleet, you'll probably be a little bit reluctant to sell and make that loss. CAS fee. So if you're only really going into the low emissions zone once a blue moon, then it might not really affect you that much, and you may be able to absorb the cost, the retrofit cost. So for LCVs, again, the nature of it, they're a lot cheaper than, for example, a truck or bus retrofit, as there's obviously more parts and more things involved. Pipework, etc. DPFs are a lot bigger, so the retrofit cost compared to replacing your vehicle with a Euro 6, that's obviously going to be one of the kind of key points, and obviously resale value. And then you arrive at the point where either it makes sense to replace your vehicle, or does it make more sense to actually retrofit your vehicle. In terms of retrofit suppliers, so the bus market very well covered, because there's been a need for retrofit systems for a number of years. HGV, the drive for that is slowly coming into play, and we're slowly seeing more and more systems being developed by retrofit suppliers, and the same case for LCV, so vans. Over the past 6 to 12 months, we've had quite a number of vehicle models tested and approved. But the kind of process that a retrofit supplier goes through, if you're wondering why there's not a huge number of retrofit options available at the moment, is that there's only obviously a total number of non-compliant vehicles through the DVLA database, if they're privy to that number of vehicles that would enter a clean air zone or a low emission zone. You can take out the vehicles that will be replaced, and again, that's information only a kind of operator or a business owner would know. And then we arrive at the kind of point where a supplier of these types of systems would know what the number of vehicles that would be right for retrofit are, and then it's a case of creating a business case to develop a system, because again it costs quite a lot of money to develop and test these systems. So a supplier need to know that there is there's a kind of business case for it before they proceed. So okay, so Severas itself, the Clean Vehicle Retrofit Accreditation Scheme, it's run by Energy Saving Trust, and with technical help from ZEMO, previously known as the Low CVP. So it is what, it's pretty much self-explanatory. It's an accreditation scheme for retrofit systems. Through these slides, obviously we're talking about exhaust after treatment mostly, but there are other retrofit options as a whole for maybe some other vehicle types, electric drivetrain conversion, repowers, hybridization as well. But the vast majority of systems that we've approved under CIVRAS are exhaust after treatment, and obviously we've got a number of buses retrofitted in Edinburgh, Dundee, and hope to have quite a few retrofitted under this scheme as well. So, to become a CIVRAS supplier, there's obviously the kind of supplier requirements, the company requirements. You obviously need to be a legal entity. Terms and conditions of the business. They have to have a warranty provision in place. That's key, and the usual in regards to employer liability insurance and a valid QMS system. So that warranty provision there is required, so that obviously we know that they can take care of any issues that may pop up in regards to these retrofit systems. A 2-year warranty is standard, but you can, and we would recommend taking out a 5-year warranty, which all of the retrofit suppliers offer anyway, just so you're covered obviously for a longer time, especially if you're keeping the vehicle for that amount of time. In terms of the product requirements, obviously these are designed to reduce pollutants, primarily NOx and in particulate matter. If you're testing a system on a taxi or a van, you need to go through a representative test cycle at a test house such as Millbrook or Myra, for example. So anywhere where you can, they have the capability to do a chassis dyno test with the system fitted, and if obviously they meet the CIVRAS standards, they're obviously approved and then added to our list. And just other things such as in-service performance, conformity of product. So these things are obviously added there just so that we see, or we don't see, a kind of fit and forget scenario with these systems. We want to know that when they're fitted, they will be working for the next 2 to 5 years at least. So a CIVRAS requirement is that we can, and the customer, and obviously the owner of the vehicle who's had the system fitted, can ask for in-service telematics, so you can actually monitor the performance of your vehicle as you go along, and from that you can identify if there's any issues with the vehicle and obviously get in touch with the retrofit supplier for that. So this is just a slide just to kind of show, for some people that maybe not aware, it is a HGV, but it's the same story with vans and cars. Why can't we just use Euro 5? The difference between Euro 5 diesel and a Euro 6 is vast, as you can see there. So obviously in some cases as much as 100 times worse NOx than what we would see with that OE Euro 6. And obviously the retrofit Euro 6s are tested as equivalent to Euro 6 or there or thereabouts. So you will see that big of a drop in your emissions if you were to go down the route of replacing or retrofitting. So that's just what I kind of briefly covered a couple of minutes ago. So all systems have to go through a representative test cycle for a van, for LCV. There's one developed by Lochee CVP 2017, so the van cycle, a combination of the TFL AM peak and WLTC cycles, and as you can see there is inner city, urban and extra-urban, to try and maybe try and make a representative test cycle. Again, it'll be different for every business, every person, but you can't test on every single probable route. So this was one that was developed and seems to be working quite well. So just a point on that, there are a lot of Euro 5 vans on the road. I think they were one of the last vehicle types to adopt the Euro 6 emission standards. So it just means that there's always a lot of these on the roads, and a lot in that case to be replaced, or there's quite a number that are maybe right for retrofit. But in general, it's the cost to replace a van is lower obviously than a bus or a HGV. So that option in terms of just upgrading to a Euro 6 OEM or a factory one is more of a possibility than for maybe other vehicle types, unless it's a specialist type of van and you've got maybe some expensive kit on the back of it that would make it a lot more expensive to do that. So in that case, retrofit would be more of an option. So at the moment, we normally, whenever I do these slides, there's normally quite a number of retrofit suppliers that can offer systems with the van. It's mostly HES, so they're a German company, but also they have a base in I think Swindon in the UK. So they've developed systems for, as you can see from on the right hand side, a number of vans and camper vans and shuttles and minibuses, just whatever they're obviously used for. But we have some of the kind of most popular ones, I would say, that we see on the roads in the UK. So Volkswagen Transporter. Again, these are Euro 5 diesels. A Renault Master, which we've had a number of these fitted in Edinburgh under the Bear scheme, as these were used as minibuses. So we have the Vauxhall Movanos, Nissan NV400s, Mercedes-Benz Vitos and Vianos. So that covers quite a lot. If there isn't a system for your van at the moment, it's worth either getting in touch with ourselves or, in fact, some of the retrofit suppliers, most likely HES, as there may be, they may be looking to develop a system for your exact vehicle type. But many of these are very similar in terms of engine size, so it may not mean that they have to go and spend thousands and thousands of pounds to develop a system for I don't know, 2.1 litre system that's not on this list at the moment. They may be able to get an approval extension through fitting a system, trial fitting a system to a new vehicle or a vehicle that's not on this list, and through telematics showing that it actually works in service. And if obviously Civras, if you're satisfied with the performance and it meets all the standards, the emission standards, that we can obviously give an approval extension for that. But that's what we have at the moment. So I took this from our website yesterday. So that's as things stand. And again, just to point out, these are SCR systems for Euro 5 diesels. So these systems, to make it affordable, use the factory DPF. So if you have a Euro 5 diesel, you will have a DPF fitted. And they continue to use that. So all they're actually doing is fitting an SCR unit, which is designed to reduce the NOx. Your DPF will take care of the particulate matter anyway, and then obviously they integrate it with your kind of OBD. So you'll have warning lights, etc., to show you if there's there's issues with the system. So it will be an SCR unit that they fit to your existing system, and obviously replace the kind of tailpipe, etc., to go with that. These are just a couple of pictures just to show what it looks like. Pretty much just an exhaust like for like, but they are adding an SCR unit to go with your DPF. I think this is a Mercedes Viano, but depending on obviously exhaust and pipework, they almost all look the same. They use the same or similar SCR units. It just depends on size, and obviously the kind of tailpipe, the pipework slightly different for each. Okay, so on the Civras website, obviously that list of approved systems I've just taken from a couple of days ago, but that's our website. You can go to it, and as new systems, newly approved systems come in, we then just update on this. And you can also use the Civras register, so you type in or you put in your own vehicle type, and it'll let you know if there are any approved systems and who offer these systems, if there's more than one supplier that have an approved system at that time. Okay, so Just a reminder of post-fitment vehicle registration. So once you have a quote from HS or another supplier and have this fitted, I mean, it's you know, it's kind of vehicle dependent, system dependent, but you'd probably be looking at around £3,000 to £4,000 for one of these systems. And again, if you're getting the 80% or up to 80% funded, you could actually be upgrading your Euro 5 to Euro 6 compliant vehicle for something like £800, which is actually quite reasonable. But to have it, to be safe from low emission zone charges or CAS fees if you're obviously use your vehicle down south as well. The vehicle is retrofitted. An installation certificate is produced and provided by HS, and they update a log of all systems that they retrofit. They provide that to EST. We compile that and then we share the list, a kind of white list, to TfL and the CAS portal check. So at the moment, obviously we provide that list for a number of cities in England that use our list, and that includes TfL. So I think there's a question whether or not Transport Scotland will use the same process in the same portal checker or the vehicle checker for the low emission zone. But I guess that we'll get that answer in the next the next year or so. We'll see what the plan is, but typically that would happen. So it's down to the retrofit supplier to actually provide EST with the list, and then we then provide the the kind of enforcement agencies as to whether or not your vehicle is now obviously retrofitted and compliant. Once it goes on the list, you're obviously free to kind of go into the low emission zones and avoid any charges. And that's just that. These are just examples of what these documents look like. So that's obviously just the retrofit installation document that you will receive. This is just a log that the retrofit supply us, and this is obviously the kind of vehicle CAS checker. So we have Bath, Birmingham and Portsmouth on it at the moment. That may in future include obviously Glasgow, Dundee, Aberdeen and Edinburgh, if that's obviously the kind of route that they choose to go down, if they use a kind of national vehicle checking system. And that's pretty much me. I know we're probably going to go to questions after this anyway, Heather, so I can pass on to you and leave it to the floor.
That's great. Thanks, Amir. And as Amir said, if you are interested in the retrofit fund that we offer, but there's not a solution available for your vehicle, do get in touch with us because we can register your interest. And we work closely with Amir and his team. And if a solution becomes available, we'll notify you so that you can apply and get some support. But we'll get started with the Q&A session. We've had a question come through, so if I could ask the speakers to turn on their cameras. Please do keep submitting questions in the chat. We are still keeping an eye on it. But this is a question for Shauna and Tom. I'll let you put your hand up, whoever wants to answer it first. But so there's a maximum penalty of £480. So even if the non-compliant vehicle came in and out of the low emission zone twice a day, every day, is that still the maximum penalty?
Yes, it wouldn't take you long to ramp up to the 480, but that's right. So I think it's one penalty per day. Okay,
so if they went in the zone in the morning, left, and then went back in the afternoon, would that just still be classed as one penalty, or would they get two?
I think that's right, Shauna.
Yeah, per day. Yeah.
And this is a question that we often get asked as well. How will you know that how will you monitor the cars that are non-compliant? How are you going to track the vehicles that enter the low emission zones?
So through the ANPR camera system, we'll be able to identify vehicles that will flag non-compliant vehicle. Well, what we'll do is we'll then have to link in with DVLA to get the status of the vehicle, and then once that's confirmed, we would a penalty notice would be issued. The 480, I think someone just in the chat, I saw a question come up, is not a year maximum. No, I think it resets after a certain period. I want to say it's a month, and then it would start again.
Yeah, I think it's a 90-day period.
90 days. 90 days.
Yeah.
But I imagine even with that, you know, if you just were continuously sort of accepting the charges, it really wouldn't take long to incur some very high costs to your business.
To get to the cost of a compliant vehicle, I think.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Amir, there's a question that we often get asked by people interested in the retrofit fund, wondering how long the retrofit process takes. You know, if they were to put their vehicle in, is their vehicle off the road for, you know, a week or a month, or how long does that take?
Well, if you asked me before COVID and before Brexit, it would probably be a simpler process, and I'd probably be able to give an exact amount. But I mean, from you know, from getting in touch with a retrofit supplier, that's just an email or a phone call, they can normally give you a quote for a system within a couple of days, and then there's normally a lead time, and this is again ignoring, you know, any kind of, you know, long-term material delays that, you know, obviously many companies is experiencing this and last year, but there's normally a, you know, a lead time of around 12 weeks. So from start to finish, you would get your, you know, chances are you'd get your, you know, your system fitted within 3 months. Sometimes it can be a lot quicker than this, as you know, if they've either been given notice or they have some of these systems already on the shelf, so they can pretty much, you know, if they've developed maybe or manufactured, say, you know, 30, because they know that they're going to be fitting these systems in the near future. It's a case of, you know, taking these systems off the shelf and fitting them. But rule of thumb, normally around 3 months from start to finish, and again, it can be slightly longer if you're fitting, you know, loads and loads of vehicles. But in the case of you know, van retrofit and this scheme, it would obviously be a, you know, kind of a limited number of vehicles. But yeah, it's, you know, roughly around that time. In terms of systems that are not approved, again, that just depends on business case. So it can take, you know, a number of months for a supplier to develop a system once they agree on it. But if there's a very strong business case for it, and you know, a large customer is coming in to say that, you know, we want our full fleet retrofitted, or we want a solution for our retrofit, and we're happy to go with you. You know, as is the case, there's obviously money involved, and you know, people can speed up the process, the process. But yeah, around 3 months.
Great, thanks, Amir. And we've had a follow-up on the fines again. So, you know, if it's sort of renewed every 90 days, that means sort of under £2,000 a year in fines. Some companies would rather swallow this cost than upgrade their vehicles. I'd like to comment on that one, just from, you know, an advice point of view, and just drawing on what, you know, Amir said. If your vehicle is suitable for retrofit with the funding, you know, the funding covers 80% of the cost. So, you know, the cost remaining is going to be less than the fines than you're going to incur, and you know, you would incur that annually as well. So if you invest and upgrade, or maybe even replace your vehicle if it's not suitable for retrofit, then over time, you know, over a few years, you would save money for sure, if not within that year. Don't know, Shauna, do you want to comment?
Yeah, sorry. I should probably clarify that comment about the 90 days. I'm just having a look at the details. Yeah, it does say that it would be reset if there were no further contraventions. So, and I think this is the thing with, you know, where we are with the schemes and whatnot. You know, obviously we're still developing the details of the enforcement system, the penalty, how we'll issue the penalty notices, etc. So, yeah, just to clarify that So that might be the deterrent, if you like, because I know the system has been, the basics have been set up in order to create a deterrent nature, and obviously, we want people to work in the spirit of things as well. We are looking, to do these things for the right reasons, to improve public health and, get the emissions down. So, yeah, I think we'll probably find that there are little nuances like that that will create the deterrent in the enforcement system. So, yeah, probably a bit of clarity from my point of view.
I also think it would be £60 for the first one, then 120, then 240, then 480, and then it might be 480 again. So it's a lot more than 480 in that 3-month period. So I don't think it'd be economically viable to take it on the chin.
Yeah, there's also the case of, obviously, if if you have a vehicle that travels through Glasgow, Dundee, Aberdeen, and we're not talking about just within your specific low emission zones. That's quite a lot of different charges from different places, and obviously it'll pretty quickly stack up to being a little bit of a more than a nuisance. And if you're looking at a retrofit solution being once funding is there, between £500 and £800, and then you never need to think, never need to worry about fines ever, well, not ever again, but for the foreseeable future, then I think that's probably probably a sensible thing to do. But again, it's just kind of case by case dependent, really.
Definitely. And do you think the standards will change over time? Like, could you see your cities introducing a zero emission zone, for example, like what's being piloted in Oxford?
So the regulations are set now to Euro 6 and Euro 4, but it is something that the Scottish Government will be looking at, not in the immediate, the next couple of years, but over the next few years. That's something they're going to at least start thinking about consulting on, and that low emission zone mechanism could be used, but it would require a change to the legislation to be able to do it. But the principle of using that low emission zone system for a zero emission or ultra low emission zone could be adapted. But at the moment, these standards are set in the legislation. But I think it is something that's on the government's mind.
Great. So we haven't had any other questions come in. I'll just ask one final question for Amir. Just again, it's a question that we get asked often by interested customers, and of course my page is taking ages to load. So do the retrofitted vehicles need specialist mechanics to maintain them, or can they kind of continue to be serviced as normal?
It's a good question. It's something that the retrofit supplier do. So within the package, within the paid package, you have obviously the system itself, and then you have the maintenance and warranty provision. That's part of the package that is kind of paid for. So no specialist training needs to be done. No, you don't need to take it to a specialist garage. The retrofit supplier themselves will service and maintain the vehicles that in a set scheduled times. I think there's maybe an annual check, and again the SCR is maintained and serviced when it's required. So would avoid taking it to any garage if you are experiencing any issues. It's that's what the warranty is there for, and we do tell anyone who has one of these Severas approved systems fitted to kind of get to know their retrofit supplier, and obviously make sure that they're aware that any issues they obviously need to fix. But from the ones that we have fitted with, there's a number fitted with the handicap loading, so they have quite a few. I think off the top of my head, 15 Renault Masters. So obviously we have access to their in-service telematics, and the kind of the feedback from them is HHS have done a really good job. A couple of teething issues maybe at the start because it was a new system. Those were the first that were fitted, but the vehicles have been, reliable, and we've obviously monitored the performance of these vehicles just through the BEAR scheme, and they seem to have performed pretty well, and very little kind of downtime, in regards to maintenance and stuff like that. So pretty positive from what we've seen.
Great. And sorry, Sarah, I didn't see your question there. There's another question that has come in. Any funding for upgrading older electric vehicles? I can start answering this, and then Amir, maybe you can talk about electric options through retrofit. But in terms of upgrading old electric vehicles, existing EVs, there's not funding currently available. However, there are the interest-free loans available from Transport Scotland through Energy Saving Trust for the purchase of new electric vehicles, and there's also a used electric vehicle option as well. So if you wanted to buy second hand but have a bit of an upgrade of what you've currently got, there's that option available too. There's also funding available for e-bikes and e-cargo bikes for businesses as well. Just wanted to put that out there as well if you wanted to shift to active travel. But Amir, is there any retrofit solutions available for converting a diesel or petrol vehicle to electric?
At the moment, for an LCV, no. Just because I think the drive for electric, electric repower, it's mostly sitting within bus at the moment, and there's been obviously a little bit of an uptake. But recently, we've actually been inundated with startup companies, and some of that are a little bit more, a little bit more experienced in the kind of game. I expect there to be a retrofit solution, an electric drivetrain conversion solution for vans and other vehicle types, HEV, in the next, I'd say maybe in the next year or so. Quite a number of companies have come to us. Obviously, fitting an exhaust to a Euro 5 diesel and making it Euro 6 compliant is, far less complex than obviously electric drivetrain conversion. So the CIVRAS scheme itself, we've got a little bit of work to do in terms of approving and obviously setting the kind of standards for what what an approved system would look like. But we've seen quite a shift and quite a kind of spur in the last few months, and I expect solutions to start kind of cropping up within the next year or so. But at the moment, nothing for vans.
Great, thanks. And we are actually out of time, but I want to thank Shauna and Tom and Amir for joining us today, and thanks to Will for providing the recording. And I have to mention my colleague Kate, who's in the background pressing play and sharing slides for us all. So thanks Kate. And thanks everyone for joining us and for your questions. We will be following up with the link to the recording of the webinar and the slides, including all the links that we mentioned for any further information. If you have any other questions that you want to ask us or ask Shauna, Tom or Amir, you can email us with our on lezfund@est.org.uk. So we'll send you the information from that email address. You can reply to us and we can try and answer your questions as best as we can. But thanks everyone.
Thanks guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.